Well, hello, Alec. How are you this morning?
It's doing great on this wonderful March morning here in Columbus, Ohio. Starting off with some gray skies, but it should be 66 later and windy.
Oh, the wind of the Midwest, that's for sure. Well, listen, I appreciate the opportunity for us to have a discussion here today around our talent impact profile assessment tool. And at CollabCon, there was a lot of interest around the TIP assessment. Why do you think this resonated so strongly?
I think entrepreneurs want to know the secrets to hiring great teams. And I think they know that relying on their gut and instinct and resume is not an ingredient for successful hires. And so I think that's number one. Two is I think a lot of times us as entrepreneurial leaders, we tolerate mediocrity amongst our leadership teams. And so having something concrete that can actually show the strengths of an individual, weaknesses, who to hire, do I have the right person in the right seat, just really resonated with everybody at ClabCon.
That's true. I think often when we work with visionaries, we see what I like to call that trifecta. It's the three critical roles to having a self-multiplying company. It's really that sales leader, the operations leader, and a high quality EA. Do you see that to be the case?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to have those three individuals in particular. So, that right number two leader, they have to be a critical hire. Why would you take any sort of chance in hiring that person? So why not go all in and making sure that they are top individual long term, and then having someone who is a sales leader that can really help your company grow and be self-multiplying when you're not in the company. And then an EA, like there's so many entrepreneurs and integrators that they go small with having an EA, whether maybe it's someone virtually, maybe it's, maybe they don't have one, but having a rock solid full-time in-person EA or a virtual EA full-time is just a game changer.
And so before we dive into each one of these roles and how we are able to evaluate right fit leaders, right fit candidates for these three roles, I'd like to take a second and just look at the results page for the talent impact profile. Would you share just a broad brushstroke overview of each one of the categories?
Yeah, so the talent impact profile or the TIP assessment is broken down into three categories. So the top category is mental aptitudes. So only a handful of assessments really measure individuals' mental aptitudes. Um, the second section is personality dimension. So they get measured in 10 areas of what will predict their future performance. This is similar to a lot of other assessments out there. And then the last section, we call it validity scores. This is measuring someone's candor when they're taking that assessment. So this has been all the more important with individuals who are trying to game the system. They're using AI to say, how can I take this assessment to get this job? And so we actually have something hidden in the assessment built in to see if they're actually being open and honest with themselves and who they are. And so we can see if they're trying to give results of someone who they're not. It's pretty insightful. And so those are the three sections. And I know we can go a little bit deeper in each section. It's also important to note that what you see in your screen here are you'll see a lot of blue sections. This is a template for an integrator position, so or a COO position. So we know that scores inside the blue benchmarks are going to be that individual is going to have a higher chance of success. As to this individual, where I think we're calling a micro manager, who does not have he's got a lot of scores outside the benchmarks. And so we can probably, even without going into detail, with a degree of confidence, know that Mike is not the right person for this role.
Mhm. Do those blue benchmarks, those ranges, do they look different if it's the same role but in somebody else's or a different company?
Yeah, so this is the standard benchmark for an integrator COO number two leader for all companies. And we've done, hundreds, if not thousands of positions like this. Now we will adjust those scores based on the company's culture and the demands of the role. So we could actually change the benchmarks based on that company's culture. So for example, maybe your company has a very high sense of urgency. There's tons of energy. And so we would want to adjust that first score on the personality dimension to showing that we need someone that is more, can work in that culture and be fast paced.
That's great. And also reminder on this validity and distortion and how important that is in the world of AI and tools like ChatGPT.
Yeah, I mean, it's critical. And we know too that, we tend to have certain positions distort more than others, particularly sales positions. And so it's all the more important. You want someone who's going to be open and honest. And if you hire someone that's going to, you're essentially hiring someone that's going to tell you what you want to hear, not exactly what's accurate and true. So it's so important to have someone who's very candid.
Well, let's take a minute and now let's dive into this integrator role. So here we have micromanager, and we're focusing on the section of his mental aptitudes. And looking at this profile, most of his scores fall outside of the benchmark range. So what does that immediately signal for this integrator seat?
Yeah, I can immediately see that this person's going to really struggle, that they're going to really rely on their past, uh, their experience to determine if any decision making. So they're going to look backwards. So if you're in a fast-paced environment, ever-changing environment, they're going to really struggle. So particularly, so we see that that micromanager here has a 3 in learning style. So this means that he's a hands-on learner. He learns by doing, not a conceptual learner. So he's going to really struggle with critical thinking, problem solving, strategic thinking ability, and anything new that the company has to face. So I would proceed with caution with hiring this individual just based on that score alone. His business terminology is not a bad score of a 6. He is above average in terms of his degree of financial and management exposure. His marketplace awareness is really good. So this would suggest that he's up to date with competitive trends, market trends, um, current events. So that's not a bad score at all. But his vocabulary, he does not have a great command of the English language. And then his numerical accuracy, just attention to detail is going to be making a lot of mistakes. So, if you want to be double checking his work and making sure that he's going to deliver work that's accurate, numbers that are accurate, that number is going to be a real problem.
Mm-hmm. So often too, I know that when we're looking at the details, we will compare several categories to see if there's alignment within them or if we can make associations. So what happens when learning style, business terms, and marketplace awareness all fall outside that success range for a number 2 leader?
Yeah, that person's going to really struggle with communication. So they're not going to be able to articulate verbally in writing. Yeah, they're gonna really struggle with that communication.
Let's hop into the personality dimensions component.
Mm.
And what happens when an integrator scores low in process orientation, for example, and organization?
Yeah, so that's one of our indispensable, or two of our indispensable traits for an integrator COO, that they really need to have a good process orientation and good organization score. So the the 3 in process orientation, this means that this person is going to have a hard time implementing processes, executing on process, and following through with processes. They're going to be more on the creative side. It would be very common for entrepreneurs and visionaries to really like this person because they may be a lot like them. Where this person, you want your number 2 to be able to look at the overall business operations, look at current processes, determine if they're good, create new processes that are better. This person's going to struggle with that because of their low mental aptitudes and their low process orientation. And then organization, this is their ability, time management skills, Can they anticipate, prioritize? Do they value the plan? And this person's going to be a little bit more spontaneous. They think on their feet. Again, this is probably a little bit more like a visionary entrepreneur, which are actually very good strengths for that role, but not strengths for that number two position.
So if I also look at this for the, the sense of urgency, this individual is at a 1, and we have the success bracket set between a 5 and a 7. So could you speak to that specifically for this type of a role?
Yeah, so this person is going to be really hard on themselves and others. So they're going to have a very low tolerance. Um, they want everything done very fast. And they're not going to be as patient with themselves and as tolerant. And so this is not a good score for someone in a leadership role. They're going to have trouble with managing employees, coaching employees, and they're just going to be incredibly difficult on themselves and others. Not a great score, even though if you have a culture that has a high sense of urgency, this person's going to still struggle because they are really hard on themselves. They may be a little bit maybe on the insecure side of things. They may need that affirmation from others, and so this is not a good score to have for that integrator.
So I would like to evaluate their validity scores. Before doing so, any other thoughts on the personality dimensions for micromanager?
Well, I think two scores that we need to note here, that is the 9 in assertiveness and the 9 in competitiveness. So it's about midway down on the screen. The 9 in assertiveness says that this person has to be in charge. It's their desire for control. They want it their way, my way or the highway. They're going to be incredibly decisive. They're also going to be very competitive, meaning they want to win at all costs, which is good for like a salesperson. But for a manager, it's not about the team winning, it's about them winning individually. So they want to be right. They could be very argumentative. And so that's going to be, so if you combine someone that wants to be in charge and assertive with I want to win, and then even go one down, that's 7 in audience sensitivity, they're not going to have any empathy for their people on their team. So there could be, I like to call it the dead body effect, where, this type of manager is going to essentially come in, take charge. There'll be a lot of employee turnover. Yeah, so this is not a very good assessment for that number two person.
Now, further, I think we'll be able to see through their validity score. Would you mind sharing what you notice here?
I think we want to point out that, this individual is outside the validity scales, and so they're just not being honest. They are trying to portray themselves as someone who's very different. And we know that they weren't open and honest when they took the assessment. So this is a huge red flag in terms of choosing who this person is.
Well, Alec, it seems that that we generate a lot of insights from utilizing the TIP assessment when we are screening candidates, and I think it's pretty clear to say that micromanager would not be a great fit in the integrator seat. So I'd like to provide a comparison with micromanager and miles ahead. And do you mind sharing a few highlights, and who would you recommend for a role as
Yeah,
an integrator?
yeah. Well, real quickly, you can see that Miles has a lot more scores inside the blue benchmarks. And so we can quickly see that Miles is going to be a much stronger candidate. Now, this is really cool because, Mike may have had a better resume, but Miles has a much better assessment. So, number one, the learning style is different. So, Miles, his learning style is a 5. This is average college learned, uh, college educated individual. So he's going to have a much better critical thinking and process orientation. His business terms and his marketplace awareness are both 9. So that's in the top 3% of the population. So he's going to be a really good communicator. He's going to stay up to date on competitive trends, market trends. He's got a real strong vocabulary with an 8, so just rock solid there. So we know he's going to be a great communicator just on those mental aptitudes. Um, so from there, Miles has a much better mental aptitudes.
Hmm. So Alec, also like to ask, in some worlds, I know you in the EOS community talk about the VI duo, right? The visionary integrator duo. And I like to ask as well, when it comes to that VI duo and that relationship, when you look at what I'll call the topic of stretch, not strain, right? So if we were,
Mhm.
let's assume that a visionary who also would complete our assessment tool early in our process, as part of making sure we identify the right who that's going to work well in the seat, work well with the team, but especially work well with that visionary. If let's assume that that visionary was a one all the way across, right? And this individual was somewhere between the two far right hand side, like 7, 8, 9. What does that tell you, and how do we leverage that in something like our side by side consultation?
Yeah, so having that number two, you really need to have complementary skills. So, for example, maybe the visionary is a little bit lower on process orientation and organization. That actually is going to work better with someone like Miles, who's higher in process orientation and organization. So that's going to be complementary. Um, if we look at Mike's assertiveness level, he's a 9, and if you as a visionary, if you're also fairly assertive, that's going to be conflict, and there's going to be a lot of clash. Both of you will going to want your way. And so that's where we're looking for something that is also complementary. So sometimes we want to see completely different scores. Sometimes we want to see similar scores. But that role is critical, and having the assessments looked at by professionals to make sure that they're complementary is critical for long-term success. That Harvard study they did, what determines long-term success? And is it education? Is it industry experience? Is it management skills? Is it soft skills? And the number one determining factor of long-term success in an organization is fit. And so that is so critical.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for sharing, Alec, about the integrator. And again, we talked about our trifecta, the roles. We have talked about the integrator, and now we're likely to transition into talking about the sales leader. Before I even dive into that, I think we've also seen an uptick really in the sales roles altogether. Many clients reaching out to us for high quality outside sales rep that's truly going to represent their company, their culture, right, and speak really on behalf of the visionary, and represent them well in that community. So that right fit is very important to them. And then also diving into the details for a sales leader. So this is an example, Alec, of the outside sales rep. Would you mind speaking a little bit to this role? And I think we could probably just broad brushstroke on sales rep and where they're at right now, and then probably talk about as well how oftentimes it's very normal for small to mid-sized organizations to decide that they have a fantastic sales rep and promote them to the sales leader.
Yeah, this is going to be fun to talk about. So, we can see here that this person's probably going to succeed. They have a lot of scores in the benchmarks. Their mental aptitudes are strong. The personality dimensions are really strong. I like the fact that this person has a higher communication style. They're more extroverted, which we can see about midway down in performance personality dimensions. I like the fact that they're competitive. They want to win. They want to hit their quota. They're thick-skinned, and so if you're in an industry where there's a lot of no's before you get a yes, that's going to bode really well. They are also, if maybe you're in an industry where maybe it's tough. Maybe you're on the road. Maybe you travel. Maybe you got to visit different construction sites. So having this person thick-skinned is really good. And so, I would hire this sales rep. I think they're really strong in their assessment, both on the mental aptitudes and personality dimensions.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So hire them as a sales rep could be a rock star. Now, what's the key differences between someone who can sell and someone who can lead sellers?
Yeah. So, and maybe go to the next slide, Andrew, which
Sure.
will show. So this is the same individual, the same exact scores, but we've moved the template to a sales manager role. So in this sales manager role, this person's going to struggle. So, it's an old adage, but sometimes people have not heard of it. But you never want to take your top salesperson and put him in management, because you will lose your top salesperson and gain a bad manager. So this person's going to really struggle. If you look at the personality dimensions, we want someone who is a little bit more on that. Their energy level is more that middle. They're not going to have that sense of urgency. They're going to be pretty comfortable and calm in their decision making. We want someone who's more process oriented. As a manager, you want to be able to uh, manage individuals in processes, and not someone that, this person here is going to really struggle following processes. Their organization skills are going to be really impactful, because you want a manager who values planning, good time management skills, can anticipate and prioritize. So that struggles. And if we go down to the second part of, or the bottom part of this, their assertiveness level, their competitiveness, their audience sensitivity, they're going to really struggle in managing people. My way or the highway. I want to win. I don't care what you think, and I don't value your opinion. And being very skeptical, not being able to build trust. So this person's going to really struggle managing people. And they could be a flight risk too by that last score and high motivation. So same person, same role, and you can see here on paper, or through the data, that this person's going to really struggle being in that sales manager, which, by the way, is a very key position for a self-managing company. You mentioned that earlier, Andrew. And we are working with a lot of clients right now and finding their key sales manager, their chief revenue officer role. And I love seeing that. I love seeing companies investing in great talent that can really impact their top line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think we've also seen too where companies they've not utilized our assessment tool in the past, but they have a very successful salesperson that they're considering. I think that we've seen value where we can actually leverage even utilizing the tip assessment to help them have a better understanding of that individual, to even see if maybe they are a little bit of that unicorn that may be a good fit. But often it's like you said, really, we don't want to lose the best salesperson to gain a bad leader.
Yeah, and it is a great tool for companies who want to evaluate their current team members. Oftentimes, our clients didn't even know they had a superstar on their
Mm-hmm.
team until they took the assessment. They didn't know that they had someone that may excel in another role based on their scores, or maybe someone that needs to be developed and trained. Or also know, man, there's just been some things that have been really bugging you about this person and their performance, and you get their assessment, and all of a sudden it comes to light, and you're like, okay, that's why they're driving me crazy, or that's why they're struggling in their role.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. Before we move on to the EA, any other thoughts here comparing outside sales and sales leader as you look at these comparisons?
Yeah, so again, same exact scores, but the benchmarks are different. And so, it's so important that you hire the right person for the right seat. And this is a case where you would really it would show up, where this great outside salesperson would struggle as a sales leader. It would probably cost your organization customers. Your top employees would leave, you both internally and externally. So it's so important to make sure you make the right decision. So again, this is a great tool for, hey, should you promote someone or not? So, and actually, Andrew, I had this exact situation happen to me. I had a friend of mine in my Vistage group who had a top person, and he wanted to move her to a manager role. And I said, we did the assessment, and I showed him these scores side by side. I said, you're going to lose your top salesperson, and you're going to gain a bad manager. And he decided to go with his gut and not on the data. And 3 months later, this person had left the company and actually went and worked for a competitor in sales, and made things miserable for my friend. So so important to make the right decision here.
Absolutely. I've seen this with family businesses where, the father was actually looking at succession planning and transition. And one of the children was in a sales role and thriving in a sales role.
Mhm.
And naturally, the dad was considering, this individual for leadership and making sure we were to take the time to evaluate, would this really be a good transition for that individual where everybody wins?
Yeah.
Well, great, Alec. Let's shift gears again. We're talking about the trifecta,
Mhm.
these three key roles for a visionary that really lead to that self-multiplying organization. We've talked about that integrator, number two, operations leader, second in command role. We've talked about the sales leader role, and now shifting gears to the executive assistant role. If we look at their scores overall, any things you would highlight right out of the gate?
Yeah. Well, Toby here, Toby would really struggle in this role. He only has, 5 of the 16 scores are in the benchmarks. Really going to struggle with learning. Going to make a lot of mistakes. Not going to remember things. Not going to retain things. Not going to follow a process. Completely disorganized. I don't care what the resume says. Going to be an extrovert. May have maybe a social butterfly in the office. So, not a great uh, assessment sheet here.
Mhm. When you look at memory retention, what does that create in an EA role?
Yeah, so that marketplace awareness. So Toby's going to struggle with remembering. So you may be training them on how you want your email and how you want your travel arrangements and how you prefer window or aisle or someone like me who's 6'4", hey, I really need that extra leg room. And Toby's going to not remember that. Not going to remember some of the basic stuff. Really struggle
Mhm.
with that.
Nearly all visionaries are quite fast moving,
Hmm.
ideating often,
Yeah.
exploring, moving much faster than most of the team around them. So anything that you'd say that quickly you'd be able to identify something that needs to be in a critical success bracket for that type of
Well,
personality.
yeah, that mental aptitude, I think, if you're an entrepreneur and you're moving at 100 miles an hour and you have an EA like Toby, um, that they're moving 30 miles an hour. And so that difference is going to be huge. And again, it's not an IQ measurement, it's a learning style, but you're going to be really frustrated that Toby's not getting it quick enough.
Marketplace awareness, how does that impact anticipation and proactive support?
Yeah, I mean, they show no interest in, or Toby shows no interest here in knowing your industry, knowing what competitors are, what your customers are, what success looks like. So that's really important. You want your number two or your EA to be for you and wanting you to succeed, and you want them to at least understand what world you're in, what your customers, vendors, um, and what success looks like. And Toby is Toby MS for a reason.
Mm-hmm. With Toby's personality dimensions, Toby scores low in that organization. We've been talking about it a bit, but what does that create in that seat with low
Well,
organization?
yeah. So this would be, you would want your EA to be highly organized, right? An EA, a really good A manages the visionary, not vice versa. And so this person is not going to be anticipating future calendar. They're going to be just so short-term oriented. What do I have to do today? What does my leader have to do today? Not really thinking about what's going on next week, next month. They're not going to be looking at, hey, what are your 90-day goals? What do you want to accomplish in 90 days? At Strategic Coach and EOS, we talk about this 90-day world. Well, this person's so focused on today. They're not focused on 90 days. They're going to have a hard time organizing your email and your calendar and your travel arrangements. It would I would venture to guess that they would probably mess up some of the things. They may book the wrong hotel in the wrong city. Uh, they may, schedule your rental car pickup for 3 p.m. when the flight doesn't land until 6 p.m. And so this, I would run from this candidate.
Mhm. So, Alec, would someone like Toby likely interview well? Would a visionary like this individual at first, and what things might show up in the first few months on the job?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, this person's going to be really a great interview. Their communication style is an 8. So they're going to be extroverted. They're going to be very cordial in person. They're going to give a very good opinion. Their questioning tendency at the bottom, second one from the bottom. So they're very trusting. So they're going to build relationships. So this would be someone that would be like a wolf in sheep's clothing. That they would when you first meet them, would be like, oh man, they're great. But then when you hire them, they're not going to be. And this almost exactly happened to me 20 years ago when I had a mailing and printing company. I hired an executive assistant. She interviewed really well. I had her take this assessment, and I said the assessment has to be wrong. The assessment said that she was going to be a slow learner, disorganized, a social butterfly. And I said, this can't be true. And I didn't know how to interview then. I know how to interview now. And so I checked her references, and I didn't know how to ask good reference questions like I did back then. And so I hired her, and everything the assessment said was spot on. We ended up firing her. She was completely insecure, disorganized, a social butterfly, and made a lot of mistakes. And we let her go within 3 weeks.
I guess that also when you look at Toby's validity scores, this also tells you,
Yeah.
Toby's a mess, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So let's wrap up the EA discussion with a look at two different candidates and just a few things that you would highlight between who would be a good fit as an EA for a visionary.
Yeah. So between Toby, a mess, and Claire, in order, Claire, you can see, you don't have to be an expert on this assessment, that Claire is going to succeed. She has all of her scores in the benchmarks, and she's going to be a quick learner. She is going to be a great communicator. She's going to be organized, process oriented. She's going to she's also has a lot of scores that are 4, 5, and 6s in the personality dimensions, which we know that they're going to be the employees that are so easy to get along with. There's not going to be any drama. You're not going to have any people issues. You're not going to have to spend time managing them. With Claire being someone with a learning style of an 8, she wants a challenge. And so, if your biggest mantra would be to make sure Claire is always challenged and she has something new to learn. So she's going to succeed in managing your travel, managing your email, your actual hard copy folders and files, and computer organization. And if you use any sort of software like 90 or Bloom or Stretty to keep you on task, she's going to be wonderful in making sure that's all organized and following through with everything. I always say a great EA is they have to manage their boss and not the other way around. And so I'm confident that Claire would be a wonderful EA. And not even seeing Claire's resume, I would hire her because she's that superior to Toby, just based on her scores.
So, Alec, how would you advise a visionary who maybe has been dotting I's and crossing T's as best they can, thinking that it's good enough, and just carrying a certain load and maybe having somebody that's doing some of the admin work? How would you speak to them about, again, the value of the right fit EA for them?
Yeah, well, number one, if you don't have an EA, you don't have an assistant, you are the assistant, so that's something we hear at Strategic Coach. So that's number one. Also think about the value of your time and versus the time of paying someone to do that. You shouldn't be doing $20, $25 an hour work if you are an assistant. So how much more time can you spend in your unique ability, in your superpower, making a difference, building the company, growing the company, whether that's in marketing or creating services? So having a good EA and a good number 2, that's a game changer, and you're on your way to having a self-managing or self-multiplying company.
Well, Alec, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. Again, really talking about the trifecta, right? The operations leader, sales leader, and the EA. I think these are extremely important roles that really bring freedom, sanity, space for a visionary to operate in their unique ability, giving them a lot of their life back, and adds a lot of value to the company towards that self-multiplying ability. Any other thoughts or questions before we wrap up today?
Yeah, just the cost of a mishire is about 3 times the annual salary. So if you're hiring a 60K individual, that the cost at stake is 180,000. Or if you're hiring a 150,000 person, you're almost at $500,000. So this assessment is a fraction of that, and you're going to gain productivity from that decision. So it's always better to spend a little bit, a fraction of what's at stake here, and making the right decision.
Well said. Well, thanks a lot, Alec. Look forward to having another good discussion here soon.